Willow Creek was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind of place people dream of, with soft sunlight, birds singing, and the scent of coffee in the breeze. But that morning at around 7:15, the calm was shattered by a series of sounds that startled the whole neighborhood awake. The first bark was loud. It wasn't the kind of bark that signals an intruder. It was high-pitched, sharp, and echoed, as if coming from the throat of a wounded creature. Then came the second one. Then a deeper, more frantic howl, sounding like a cry for help from a soul trapped between two worlds. A few doors opened. The second-floor window of house number 16 creaked open. All eyes turned to the source of the noise, a black iron gate nearly 2 meters high at the end of the yard at house number 14. There, right in the middle of the narrow gap between two metal bars, the large head of a German Shepherd was wedged tightly. Its ears were drooping, eyes wide with panic, teeth gritted, as if ready to battle its own fear. His name was Max, a large, strong male dog often seen walking with his owner, Teresa, a single woman who loved animals and treated Max like her own child. Max was always friendly and well-behaved, but today, Max was no longer the friendly neighborhood dog everyone knew. He was thrashing wildly. His front paws scraped the ground, bloodied as he tried to pull his head out of the cold metal bars. But the more he struggled, the more pain he caused himself. Saliva dripped in a puddle beneath his chin, and every time he howled, the sound sent chills through the onlookers. The first person to run over was Mr. Parker, the elderly neighbor from across the street. He was still in his coat, holding a cup of hot coffee in his hand. "Max," he called, but the dog didn't respond, his eyes still wide with fear. Next came Liam, the 17-year-old boy from house number 12. Having heard the barking, he rushed out in his slippers, one of which was still on the wrong foot. "What's going on?" Liam asked, his eyes fixed on Max. "It's stuck. Badly," Mr. Parker said, kneeling down by the gate. Both of them approached slowly, trying not to further scare Max. But Max was growling loudly every time their hands came close to his neck. It wasn't aggression, it was pure panic. Clearly he thought they were trying to hurt him more. Each time a hand brushed against him, Max jerked violently, his head still stuck, but his neck was red from the constant friction. "We need to do something. He could snap his neck if this goes on," Mr. Parker mumbled. Another neighbor brought out a bottle of dish soap, hoping to lubricate the metal and make it easier to remove. But no matter how much they sprayed, Max's head still didn't budge. Every time they tried to shift his position, Max howled in pain so loudly that some people had to turn away. Within less than 10 minutes, over 10 people had gathered around. The adults were anxious while the children were kept at a distance. Some were calling animal rescue, but the line was busy. Others tried calling Teresa, Max's owner, but no one answered. "We can't wait 20 minutes, he's running out of strength," someone said loudly. People began murmuring, discussing and filming, but no one had a real solution. One person suggested cutting the bars, but no one had the tools. Another suggested trying to calm him down first. But how could you calm a creature so close to the edge of fear and panic? Max was panting heavily, his tongue hanging out, his head still stuck. His eyes had gone from fear to despair. Every breath seemed to be more labored. Someone whispered, "He's going to suffocate if we don't get him out in a few minutes." No one knew exactly what had caused Max to get stuck between the bars. Maybe he was chasing a cat or a noise, or maybe it was simply instinct. But now it was his survival instincts that were making him writhe in agony. And then in that moment, when the air was as tense as a drawn bow and the eyes of the adults were filled with despair, something small and unexpected appeared, moving as gently as a breeze. Max continued to struggle relentlessly, and time seemed to pass slowly and ominously. The entire neighborhood had gathered around the iron gate, where the large German Shepherd's head was trapped, barking incessantly. But the adults standing around people who were supposed to be strong were completely powerless in front of a creature that was sinking into panic. Mr. Parker shuddered as he saw the bloodstain beginning to spread across Max's neck from the friction as it tried to pull its head out of the narrow gap. Liam kneeled beside it, trying to speak to the dog in a calm tone. "Calm down, Max. Just calm down." But the more Max heard the voice, the more wildly it thrashed. Its eyes bulged red and mouth wide open from exhaustion. Max's breath came in short, sharp gasps, with its chest heaving so violently that the muscles were visibly twitching. It didn't understand what was happening, nor why it was stuck, but its survival instincts told it was being threatened. "We can't just let it be like this," Mr. Parker muttered, sweat dripping from his temples. Liam looked around and then ran to his house to grab gloves and a bottle of water. Another neighbor brought dish soap, hoping to lubricate the bars so Max's head could slide out. But all attempts were in vain. Every time someone tried to approach Max, bared its teeth, growling, and jerked its head, causing its jaws to slam against the metal, making a sound that sent shivers down everyone's spine. A woman standing nearby covered her mouth, crying, "It's going to break its neck if it keeps this up," a man said anxiously. Another man named Caleb, who worked for a construction company, suggested, "I have a handheld cutter at home. I'll go get it." But Mr. Parker shook his head. Cutting metal this close to its head, even a spark could cause it serious injury. A debate began to break out. Some wanted to wait for the animal rescue team to arrive, while others insisted they should act immediately. Someone suggested using ice to calm Max down. Others said they needed tranquilizers. But no one had a truly effective solution, and everyone was afraid that doing something wrong could cause Max further harm. "How long until the rescue team gets here?" Liam asked, still staring at Max, who was shivering. "About 20 minutes, Mr. Parker replied, gripping his phone tightly. But looking at the situation, 20 minutes is too long. A wave of tension spread throughout the crowd. A few people started recording videos while others whispered anxiously. Some muttered, "Why isn't anyone doing something?" But no one dared to actually act. Max wasn't just a trapped animal. It was a strong creature in panic, and any wrong move could turn this situation into a disaster. Nina, a young woman who lived nearby, ran into her house and brought out a bag of dog treats. She crouched down, trying to coax Max with a sweet voice. "Here, baby, I've got some food. Look, Max." But Max didn't pay attention. Its eyes darted around constantly, its body shaking, breath quick and heavy. It was too stressed to care about food. A child asked her mother, "What's wrong with the dog, Mom?" The mother pulled the child away, whispering, "Don't look, it's going to pass out soon." Indeed, Max began to stagger. Not because its head had been freed, but because it was running out of strength. Its tongue hung out, dangling to the side of its mouth, its head starting to droop, no longer struggling to get free, but almost like it was giving up. Mr. Pym. Parker and Liam exchanged desperate glances. "We're about to lose it," Liam whispered. The atmosphere became heavy and suffocating. No one said anything else, only the sound of Max's labored breathing, the wind rustling through the trees, and a few muffled sobs from the crowd. People who had once been afraid of Max because of its fierce appearance now looked at it with pity, a creature on the verge of giving up on life because of a small mistake. In that moment, when the strong, experienced adults had to step back in front of a wounded creature, no one expected that hope would come from the most unexpected place. The panic gradually subsided into a terrifying silence. Max, now no longer thrashing, had his head slumped between the metal bars, breathing heavily as though suffocating. His tongue still hung out of his mouth, his eyes dimming from exhaustion. Each breath he took sounded like a scratch deep in his throat. The crowd stood still. No one spoke. All eyes were fixed on Max's weak movements. The fear had now turned into absolute helplessness. And then something strange happened. Silently, without any warning, a small creature crawled from the grass behind the porch of house number 10. It was Benji, a little boy barely 1.5 years old, the son of the young couple living near the Iron Gate. And no one in the crowd noticed his appearance until it was too late. Benji wore a light blue pajama set, tiny fabric shoes on his feet, his hair messy from just waking up. The boy wasn't walking, but crawling. Each movement is slow, yet determined, his big round eyes fixed on Max. Not a hint of fear, not a crawl envy, just the curious gaze of a child who hadn't yet learned of danger. Benji's mother, Clara, had just turned her attention away from her son for less than a minute to go into the kitchen and get his bottle. When she turned back, the back door was ajar and her son was no longer on the couch. "Benji!" she yelled, her voice frantic, echoing across the backyard. She rushed outside and barely caught a glimpse of her son crawling toward the Iron Gate, where a giant dog, feared by everyone, was trapped breathing weakly. Benji! The shout came from several people at once, all turning their heads. Time seemed to freeze. Benji continued crawling past the grass, past the legs of the adults crowded around. He didn't pay attention to anyone. His eyes were fixed on Max, who was slumped in the metal frame. Clara was about to rush forward, but Mr. Parker quickly raised his hand to stop her. Wait, just wait a second. What are you talking about? That's my son, Clara screamed. But Mr. Parker didn't take his eyes off the scene in front of him. Max had opened his eyes and was looking directly at Benji. No more growling, no more howling, no more jerking or whining. Just a look. The look of a creature quietly observing something it had never seen before, a small creature, unafraid with no sign of danger, only peace. Benji crawled closer to the gate. He sat down. His small hands touched the bars, just inches away from Max's head. He giggled softly, then tilted his head up to look at the giant dog trapped in the frame. The whole neighborhood held its breath. A few people began to cry out of fear. Some whispered prayers. The phones recording video were lowered. No one dared to interfere, not wanting to break the moment. Max stared at the child. Then very slowly, very gently, he raised one ear. Not jerking, not panicking. Benji reached out and gently touched Max's nose, the only part of him sticking out from the metal gap. Max didn't move. And then, a sound emerged that no one could believe, a soft whine, almost like an apology, as if Max was saying, I'm tired, but I know you won't hurt me. Benji giggled again, a small laugh that sounded like light in the dark storm. The child didn't speak many words, but his eyes made it clear. It's okay, I'm here now. Max closed his eyes for the first time since being trapped. His whole body relaxed, no longer tense, no longer trembling. He exhaled a long, slow, peaceful breath. Clara collapsed into her husband's arms, tears streaming down her face. He really calmed down. Is this real? Liam whispered, his hands still gripping the metal bar. Mr. Parker nodded, his eyes red. That little he just touched something that none of us could. The heart of a creature in fear. Benji remained there, his tiny hand still resting on Max's nose. No one dared to interrupt, because in that moment, not a single adult, no matter how strong, could do what a child who had just learned to walk had done. The little boy had made the entire neighborhood silent, holding their breath and believing that sometimes the purest courage comes from the smallest of hearts. No one said anything. No one dared to breathe loudly. The scene before them was so surreal, as if someone had pressed pause on time, freezing the moment in a world that was otherwise in chaos. There Benji, just over a year old, still sat on the damp grass, his tiny hand gently placed on Max's nose, the German shepherd who had just endured the worst moments of his life. Just a few minutes earlier, Max had been growling, thrashing saliva, flying eyes filled with panic, and his body seemingly trying to snap its own neck to escape the cold metal trap. But now the huge body lay still, not because of exhaustion, but because of peace. Benji wasn't scared, wasn't worried, didn't understand why everyone was staring at him as if he were from another planet. For Benji, it was simple. There's a friend who's foul, and I'm saying, I'm going to sit with him. Max didn't growl, didn't howl, didn't pull back. The giant dog, witnessed by more than 20 adults, let out a soft whine, then closed its eyes as if it was seeking refuge in this little boy. The head that had been stuck between the bars stopped jerking. The neck no longer tensed in resistance. Its body had stopped trembling. The whole neighborhood stood frozen. Mr. Parker stood still, his old hands gripping the metal gate, loosening, as if he had just witnessed something beyond all understanding. Clara, Benji's mother, stood trembling behind her husband, tears falling nonstop. She knew she was only a few steps away from her son, but something more sacred than fear was holding her back. She understood that if she interfered at this moment, if she broke this silence, the miracle might vanish like a dream. Then, as if to confirm that this was not an illusion, Max slowly extended his head, just enough for Benji to gently nudge his nose against Max's. A light, tender touch, like the way children gently find their favorite teddy bear. The whole neighborhood held its breath. And then Max licked Benji's finger lightly. It wasn't a rushed lick, nor was it instinctive. It was a gentle, trembling, and grateful lick, as if Max was whispering, "Thank you. You're not afraid of me. You trust me. And because of that, I get to live." A wave of emotion spread through the crowd. A woman gasped, "Oh my God, it licked the boy's hand." An elderly man wiped tears from his eyes, his hands shaking as he adjusted his glasses. "I've never seen anything like this in my life." Liam, who had been kneeling beside the gate the whole time, now almost forgot what he was supposed to do. He stared in awe at Max, the creature he had once feared and pitied, now silently calm like a statue before the little child. "He did it," Mr. Parker whispered, eyes fixed on Max and Benji. "That little boy, he did what we couldn't." All the emotions, fear, tension, pain, seemed to melt away in that moment. Benji didn't need to say a word. The mere presence of the child was enough. Max began breathing evenly again. The ragged, heavy breaths from before became slow, deep breaths. His ears perked up, his eyes still closed as if he was relishing the moment of safety. The noise from the crowd no longer seemed to affect Max. The dog had chosen to trust humans, thanks to the presence of a child who hadn't even learned to speak properly yet. Then Benji clapped his hands softly as if cheering for himself and his new friend. The quiet clap echoed through the stillness, causing a few people to laugh through their tears. The German Shepherd, the animal many had once feared for its size and fierce appearance, now looked like a creature not defeated by humans, but by gentleness. When Mr. Parker and Liam exchanged a nod, they understood that the time had come. Max no longer thrashed. If they were going to free his head, it was now, at this very moment when he trusted, when he was calm. That was their only chance. And all of this was thanks to a little boy. In the quiet space, only the soft breaths of Max and the steady clapping of Benji could be heard, and the tension seemed to ease. But no one dared to be certain about what would happen next. All eyes were still fixed on the large dog, Max, who lay weakly with his head still stuck between the metal bars, but at least he was no longer struggling. Little Benji remained silently sitting beside him, his hand gently resting on Max's nose as a gesture of reassurance. The people around began to breathe a little easier, but the worry still hadn't completely faded. Though Max showed signs of calming down, the narrow gap between the bars still held his head tightly, making everyone unsure whether Max could be freed easily or not. Mr. Parker was the first to regain his composure, though his eyes were still red with tears. He looked at Max, then at Benji, and then out at the crowd. Slowly, he stood up and walked slowly toward the gate, his eyes following each movement of the dog. "We need to do something, Liam," he said in a determined voice, but also filled with uncertainty. "We can't leave him like this any longer." Liam nodded, still holding tightly onto the metal bar. He turned to Benji, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you so much," Liam whispered, though he knew Benji couldn't understand everything he was saying. But a child barely able to crawl and laugh had done what the adults couldn't. That was the only hope. Everything seemed to stop as all eyes were on Max. Time passed slowly. The closer they stood, the more they could sense Max's vulnerability, as if he were no longer a strong dog, ready to protect everything, but a creature that needed to be protected. A few people stepped back, not daring to come closer. Others stepped in cautiously, seeing that Max's head was still trapped and carefully observing. Max was no longer thrashing, but that didn't mean the dog was fully okay. Mr. Parker finally spoke to Liam, his voice no longer trembling, but still full of determination. "We can't wait for the rescue team any longer. Every second counts and could be dangerous for him. Try carefully and free him." Liam nodded. He stood up and walked toward Max, gripping the metal bar tightly. Meanwhile, the people around began to step closer. They knew this would not be an easy task, but they could not wait any longer. "Take it slow, mister," Parker cautioned, his eyes still following every movement of Liam. "Be careful. Don't make Max panic again." Liam proceeded cautiously. He took a deep breath and began gently loosening the bars, trying not to make Max feel any more stress. He used all his strength to slowly move the gate while keeping the dog's attention focused on him. Max remained calm, but it was clear that something was changing. The dog's head was still stuck, but with each movement from Liam, the tension in Max's body began to subside. Max's large head no longer slammed against the metal bars. He lay still with an oddly calm expression. Liam gently slid his hand into the narrow gap, carefully freeing small portions of Max's body from the bars. The people around him stood still, holding their breath, not daring to move. Liam's hands were trembling, but his resolve did not waver. This was the most tense moment of the entire day. Then after a few careful movements, Max suddenly exhaled deeply, as though he had completely relaxed his body. Liam gently pulled Max's head out of the bars. Max had been freed. Cheers erupted from the crowd. The sound of applause was almost unbelievable. The entire neighborhood seemed to explode with joy. Max stood up, staggering a few steps, and then turned to look at Benji, still sitting quietly beside the gate. The dog moved toward the boy, not in a rush, but with gentle steps. Max gently pressed his head against Benji's shoulder as if to silently thank him. The crowd erupted in cheers, not only because Max had been saved, but because they had witnessed a miracle. A miracle from a child that no one ever thought could do such a thing. Benji, barely a year and a half old, had helped Max overcome his panic and brought peace in a way no one expected. Max didn't hurry to leave Benji. The dog slowly curled himself around the little boy, as if his heart had found a safe place. Benji giggled again, patting Max's back as if the dog had become a dear friend. Mr. Parker stood watching, tears flowing from his eyes without him even realizing when. That little boy has changed everything. He whispered, his voice full of emotion, and there between the iron gate peace once again filled the air. Max had been saved not just with the help of the adults, but thanks to the tenderness and pure courage of a little child. The scene before them was unbelievable. Max, the large German shepherd, had now been freed from the iron gate and was standing firm, though his breathing was still not fully stable. He looked around, his eyes still showing some panic, but no longer the hopelessness he had earlier. Now he slowly approached Benji, the boy who had saved his life. Max didn't run away like other dogs would after being rescued. He didn't flee or leave everything behind. Instead, he walked straight to where Benji was, where trust and peace had found him. The dog knelt down and pressed his head against Benji's shoulder, as if sensing the safety, the protection from the tiny child no one thought could create such a profound change. Benji still sat there smiling happily, not fully understanding the miracle of the moment. His tiny hands gently patted Max's head, as if this were a familiar pet he had cared for all along. The bright smile on his face spread a warm energy that calmed the remaining worries in the hearts of the people around him. Mr. Parker, who had not taken his eyes off the scene, finally couldn't hold back his emotions. He knelt down, his hands clasped together as if witnessing a miracle. Tears streamed down his face, not from joy, but from a deep emotional touch he couldn't describe with words. Never in his life had he felt so small and helpless, witnessing a child doing something that an entire crowd of adults could not. Liam, the teenager who had struggled to rescue Max, now stood there, stunned by the sight. He knew that without Benji, Max might not have survived. He turned to Mr. Parker, his eyes full of gratitude and appreciation. "That boy did it," Liam whispered, though he knew Benji couldn't hear him. "That little bum did what none of us could. Not just saving a dog, he changed all of us," Mr. Parker replied, his voice thick with emotion. The entire crowd fell silent, everyone feeling the magic of this moment. A child who hadn't even learned to speak properly, who could only crawl to a panic dome, had created an emotional revolution in the hearts of everyone. Everything seemed to return to the calm state it had once been. But this time, peace wasn't just the stillness in the air. It was the stillness in the hearts of everyone present. They had not only witnessed a rescue, but also learned a profound lesson about love, courage, and sacrifice. The people in the neighborhood began to clap, not because of a courageous act by anyone in particular, but because they all realized one thing: courage doesn't always need to be grand. Sometimes courage only requires a pure heart, an unafraid gaze, and a deep belief in what can happen when you step forward. A man standing nearby, someone who had always been terrified of dogs, now looked at Max with a different gaze. "I can't believe it. Max was once a very strong and dangerous animal. But looking at him now, I realize he's just a creature with a very fragile heart," he said. The woman beside him smiled softly, then whispered, "And yet it was a child who made him feel safe. Not an adult, but a little boy." The crowd began to disperse, each person carrying with them a new story, a new memory of the miracle they had just witnessed. But for Benji and Max, this moment would always be theirs. Max was not just saved. He was saved through love, through the natural tenderness and trust that only hearts as pure as Benji's could offer. Benji still sat next to Max, gently patting the dog's back, giggling as if he had done something incredibly significant. Max was not just an animal that had been rescued. He was the living proof of a miracle. That in each of us, there are moments when we can achieve extraordinary things that even we might not expect from ourselves. When Max stood up and walked alongside Benji, the dog looked up at the little boy one more time. Then Max wagged his tail and walked beside the child, no longer with the fear or tension he had shown before. Everyone watched not only because Max had been freed, but also because of the miraculous bond between these two creatures. One large, one small, yet both carrying an invisible strength. Mr. Parker, Liam, and the others couldn't help but feel that they had just become a part of something much larger, a story about trust, love, and redemption. And as the evening light began to shine over Willow Creek, everyone knew that no matter how hard life could be, there was always a way to bring about change. And Benji, the small but incredibly strong boy, was the proof of that.